Welcome back. Today's recap is a drama and biography movie from 2020 titled The Banker. So sit back and enjoy. The movie opens with Bernard Garrett, a shoeshine boy in a small Texas town in 1939 during the peak of racial discrimination. He takes his time working near the local bank to eavesdrop on the conversations of employees and customers. Afterward, he writes down everything he's learned in a notebook. One day, Bernard overhears bankers discussing real estate valuations, but a client's chauffeur notices him. Accusing Bernard of spying on white people's business, the man chases him off, threatening to tell his father. That evening, Bernard's father recognizes his son's remarkable intelligence after examining his notebook, but doubts he'll succeed because of racial barriers. 15 years later, Bernard saves enough money and moves with his wife and son from conservative Texas to more progressive California. In Los Angeles, Bernard's family stays in a small room at his wife's uncle's place for a modest fee. The uncle suggests Bernard work in a factory, scoffing at his plans to pursue real estate. Later, when Bernard tucks in his son, the uncle tries to lecture his niece, but she firmly defends her husband. "My husband is a genius." Bernie then promises his wife he'll get her and their son out of the barn as soon as possible. The next day, Bernard drives his cousin to work and meets a sharp white guy named Matt. Bernard surveys the market, negotiating prices, and eventually finds an apartment building. However, it needs renovations, and he can only afford the purchase itself. Bernard's wife is surprised he's targeting a white neighborhood, but he explains that overcrowded black neighborhoods will eventually need to expand. She offers to help by finding an investor, and takes him to the Plantation Jazz Club, owned by her old acquaintance, a charismatic black playboy named Joe Morris. Joe jokes and shows off during their conversation, annoying Bernard, who leaves in frustration. Bernard tells his wife they shouldn't deal with someone like Joe, let alone borrow money from him. She reassures him, saying Joe may look like Nick Fury, but he's trustworthy and reliable. Left with no choice, Bernard approaches the building's owner to negotiate the price. The owner, a shrewd businessman with a thick Irish accent, insists on $40,000 for the property. Bernard tries to negotiate the price down to $30,000, but fails. He then suggests paying in 2 installments, $30,000 up front and the remaining $10,000 once the building is fully leased. The owner replies, "My tenants won't pay more even if they see reflections on those floors, but another market will." Bernard explains that black professionals, doctors, lawyers, teachers, are looking to move out of the ghettos, a market no one is targeting, but he can. His pressure, wit, and math skills impress the Irishman, though he's not willing to take the risk and turns Bernard down. Before leaving, Bernard notices the bank's name on the calendar and the personal manager's name. Later that afternoon, Bernard goes to the bank and tries to speak with the manager, but the secretary blatantly lies, politely brushing him off. Bernard ends up waiting for hours outside the bank. After work hours, he finally speaks with the manager and presents his deal, hoping to secure a loan. That evening, Bernard is about to give up when the Irishman calls, questioning him. "Did you use my name to try and get a loan from Mr. Reed at Mid-City Bank?" "Yes." "Do you think that's standard business practice?" "No." "At least we agree on that." Then, the Irishman shares some good news with Bernard. The manager agrees to give Bernard the loan, with the Irishman acting as his guarantor. Impressed by Bernard's drive, he believes this determined man can truly succeed in business, which moves him to tears. After the deal is done, Bernard's wife takes him to Joe Morris's jazz club to celebrate their small victory. At the club, Joe approaches Bernard and, in his usual style, tries to start a conversation with a side remark. "I'm not sleeping with your wife." Joe then admits he enjoys seeing black people succeed and recognizes the traits of a successful man in Bernard. While Bernard and his cousin are making repairs to the house, a tenant notices them. "What are you doing here?" she demands, then scolds Bernard. During the conversation, he reveals he bought the house. "Don't talk back, boy. This is a white building. You can't own this place." Matt, his cousin's friend, joins them. "Are you okay working for me?" Bernard asks. "Money's green. That's the only color I care about," Matt replies. They all get to work, but a few hours later, the police show up. Responding to a call from an old woman who claimed a black man is impersonating the building's owner, Bernard claims he's the owner, but the police laugh at him. He then shows them a copy of the deed, and they leave, warning him to be more respectful to his tenants. "Yes, officer. Sorry for the inconvenience." That evening, Bernard moves into one of the apartments, sparking furious resentment from the elderly woman. The elderly woman refuses to tolerate the situation, so she moves out the next day. However, the apartment quickly fills when a well-off black woman moves in. Bernard gives the Irishman the remaining money, and in return, the man offers a partnership. He suggests using his bank connections to buy more properties and splitting the profits 50-50. Being Irish, the man faces reluctance from Americans, so he suggests Bernard handle the negotiations over the phone. Bernard's strong speaking skills, bargaining talent, and knack for numbers make him the perfect choice. But when it comes time to sign, the Irishman will be the face of the deal. Over time, they acquire numerous properties, and the business starts thriving. Bernard buys a nice house for his wife, and all the properties are rented to stable tenants, making his business thrive. But, as often happens, success is followed by setbacks. The death of his partner signals the start of a downturn. After the Irishman's passing, his wife offers to buy Bernard out, saying she's not willing to run the business with a black man. She offers Bernard a price 4 times below the market value. Bernard reminds her he owns 50% of the houses, but since their agreement was only verbal, she might not have to pay him anything. Bernard faces 2 options: accept her offer or try suing, risking ending up with nothing. Desperate for a witness, he goes to the bank manager, but the manager refuses to help, as he's already working with the Irishman's wife. Realizing he has nothing to gain, Bernard heads for the door. On his way out, he notices a sign listing companies renting offices in the building, mostly banks. This sparks a bold, almost unrealistic idea: to buy the entire building so no one would dare ignore him. Fueled by wounded pride, Bernard sets aside his principles and turns to Joe Morris with a bold proposal. He suggests they buy the building together, as Joe owns several commercial properties in black neighborhoods and understands the market. However, the savvy businessman is hesitant, not wanting to venture into white territory. Joe remarks, "There isn't a single black-owned building in downtown Los Angeles, and there's a reason for that." He challenges Bernard to convince him. Bernard responds, explaining that the banks won't dare deny them a loan when they're sitting in their own building. Plus, the banks have valuable real estate data that will help them find and assess new investment opportunities. Joe likes the idea, but knows no one will want to sell a building to black people, let alone communicate with them. So they suggest Matt become their representative. Matt is reluctant, saying he's not up for the task. Joe, seeing him as a simpleton, doubts he'll be able to help. Bernard believes Matt can be trained. Meanwhile, Matt sits in a cafe, deep in thought. A waitress recognizes him, saying, "You were a few years ahead of me, but everyone knew who you were." Curious, she asks what's troubling him. During their conversation, Matt reveals he was offered a partnership in real estate. Matt feels a surge of pride when he tells the girl about the partnership. Her newfound respect for him influences his decision, and he enthusiastically agrees to join. "I'm in." The businessmen then start teaching him the ins and outs of the wealthy lifestyle. Joe teaches Matt to play golf and socialize with wealthy people, while Bernard tries to explain real estate valuation formulas. At first, Matt struggles, disappointing Joe, who doubts they'll make him a suitable representative in just a month. However, Matt starts showing an impressive ability to learn, thanks to his sharp memory. After a month, he's effortlessly handling complex math calculations while still playing golf. Joe arranges a game for Matt at an exclusive golf club, where he accidentally meets the owner of the building, Charles Renault. Afterward, Bernard starts preparing Matt for a business meeting with Renault, going over all the bargaining strategies, potential offers, and amounts. During the meeting with the owner, Matt impresses with his strong grasp of the building's financial prospects. Matt overwhelms Renault with his calculations, leaving him stunned by his math skills. How do you do this in your head? Even Renault's accountant, using a calculator, struggles to keep up, especially when you factor in vacancies, which were at least 9%. Less than that. I counted 12 inches. How could you possibly know that? Charles, it's November. It gets dark by 5 p.m. If you want to fool someone about your vacancy rate, you need to have light in all those empty spaces by 4:30. In the end, Matt corners the businessman, successfully lowering the price from $2.5 million to $1.5 million. I'll give you 2 options. We get an 11% return rate and you take your 25% profit markup. Or we go for a 10.5% return and you get 18% markup instead of 25%. You decide, but he can't help you. The partners celebrate their victory and immediately start buying houses in white neighborhoods, securing favorable loans. The manager, who had always ignored Bernard, is amazed at how things have turned out. They reach impressive heights in the real estate market, owning 177 buildings, some with over 100 apartments. Their large presence in white-only areas makes them key players in the fight against housing segregation in Los Angeles. They even personally welcomed the vice president to their building, and Matt marries the waitress. By 1963, Bernard is a successful businessman and returns to his small Texas hometown to visit his father. At that time, Texas was one of the most conservative states, and attitudes toward black people hadn't changed. The father admits he's proud of his son. Bernard mentions that life is easier for blacks in California, but his father replies, "I don't think it's California." His words inspire Bernard. The next day, Bernard walks through the town with his son, both dressed in expensive suits. The son is surprised by the way people stare at them. The father explains that this place is very different from California and apologizes for what his son had to see. They walk toward the mainland bank where Bernard once shined shoes and gained valuable knowledge. Bernard asks the local shoe shine boy how much for a shine, but the boy replies, "I only do white folks here, sir." This encounter fuels Bernard's drive. That evening, he tells his wife he wants to buy the bank so black people in Texas can have a fair shot at a decent life. In Los Angeles, Bernard tries to convince Joe to join the venture, but Joe argues it looks more like charity for black people than a business deal. Plus, under Texas laws, they can't even enter the bank to oversee Matt. Blacks are only allowed in the bank as help. But seeing that Bernard will go through with his plan either way, Joe reluctantly agrees to the deal. They bring Matt to meet the bank owner, Robert Florence, with Joe posing as a chauffeur. The bank owner is willing to sell, but with one condition. The condition is that Robert Florence Jr. must stay on as a credit expert, and the owner will retain 20% of the shares. Everyone is ready to proceed, but the owner's son raises uncomfortable questions, like why Matt's partners aren't present at the deal. Who are Bernard Garrett and Joseph Morris? My financial partners are in Los Angeles. Why aren't they here? Honestly, they're too rich to bother. That's why they have me. Despite the tension, the deal goes through, and the trio successfully acquires the bank. Bernard then meets with black preachers, informing them that he and his partners bought the mainland bank to change its loan policies for black people. He asks for their help in identifying trustworthy potential borrowers within their congregations and stresses the importance of confidentiality. Bernard issues dozens of business and home loans to black people. Thanks to your loan, we bought 2 new pieces of equipment and doubled our revenue in 3 months. Florence Jr., who had hoped to take over as director, pressures Matt for more loans and questions the criteria for approving loans to these people. He begins spying on Matt and discovers that the new loans are going to black people. He also notices Matt secretly meeting with Bernard and reporting his progress. That evening, Matt's wife nags him about their move to this place. She's upset that he doesn't actually own the bank, as he initially promised, and is just a representative for black partners. I'm making $25,000 a year. We bought this house with 1 month's salary. When you started with them, you said they were going to make you a partner. A partner doesn't get a salary, a partner is an owner. He promises that the next bank they buy will be fully under his control, and they just need to wait a little longer. You're buying another one? She asks. I'm thinking about it. Yeah. The next day, Florence tracks down the businessman's meeting spot. He breaks into Bernard's house and threatens to expose the real owners of the bank and the recipients of the loans. He warns that the white residents will withdraw their deposits, causing the bank to collapse. Then you'll own 20% of a failed bank instead of a successful one. So, we're in this together. My father didn't know he was selling his bank to 2 black men, so that's fraud. Then, Florence reveals a notice from the comptroller of the currency, stating that their annual inspection has been moved up 2 quarters due to an anonymous tip. After Florence leaves, Matt, encouraged by his wife, proposes that the partners buy another small bank and transfer all the black people's loans there. He's already found one in Marlin for $274,000 and worked out the details. While Matt thinks it's a good idea, Bernard is hesitant and doesn't like the rush to make a move. Bernard realizes they can't manage another bank. Matt insists that he should have full control over it. It's $274,000 of Joe's and my money, so we should at least have the final say, right? If I can't run things my way, I might as well resign and go back to LA. Eventually, Matt pressures them into managing the new bank. Bernard's wife takes a janitor job there to keep an eye on Matt, saying, if they'd just trust me, you wouldn't have to. Do you resent me being here? Do you resent me wanting to run my own bank? Bernard asks. Florence then calls to say that white customers are withdrawing their money from Mainland Bank after hearing that it gives loans to black people. The federal examiner from the comptroller of the currency arrives earlier than expected for an inspection, based on an anonymous tip. I thought that wasn't until next month. No, I meant Marlin, not Mainland. The examiner will return in an hour to review the master books. Bernard, dressed as a janitor, tries to help Matt explain their bank's transactions to the examiner. The examiner finds loans that the small bank shouldn't have, and it doesn't look good. Matt rushes to the restroom to consult his partners. Bernard is confused. How did these loans end up in the package? I don't know. I reviewed each loan, Matt. There was nothing over $20,000, nothing over 20 years. Did you check the loans when you picked them up? I looked through them, maybe not carefully enough. After the inspection, the partners decide to sell the small bank to save Mainland Bank, but Matt refuses to give up the bank where he's finally in control. He buys back the loans for Mainland Bank. Their trusted banker in LA hears about it and asks, who would pay face value for those worthless loans? Bernard and Joe rush to Mainland Bank in Willis, Texas, to stop Matt. But as they explain his mistakes, the deputy comptroller bursts in, announcing that their banking license has been revoked due to suspicious transactions, and the bank is being placed in FDIC receivership. Caught and arrested by the FBI, Bernard resists before a public Senate hearing in Washington. A lawyer explains they want to use their case to change banking laws. Bernard asks, what does that have to do with me? The lawyer replies, we need to change these laws now. I mean, quit. Niggas like these can own banks and loan money to other niggas. In other words, they want to use Bernard to tighten control on banking. The senator himself talks to Matt and tells him that he needs to cast the blame on his partners so that he doesn't end up in jail for 50 years. Matt does so, At the first hearing, Matt admits he was manipulated and that Bernard was behind the deals. The senator then speaks to Bernard, urging him to confess how he exploited a legal loophole for personal gain. The senator tells Bernard that if he accepts the deal, Congress will adjust the laws to favor whites, and Bernard will go free. But if he takes the case to court and speaks out about racial discrimination, he risks jail time. The second day of the hearing begins. Bernard puts on his janitor's uniform and declares that this is the only way black people can enter a bank in Texas, despite the Constitution's promise of equality. The senator tries to interrupt, but Bernard delivers a powerful speech about racial discrimination. Bernard questions why it's so important to exclude an entire race from the American dream. The Senate is unsatisfied with his speech, and after the hearing, the federal government seizes their assets. A mostly white jury in Texas convicts them of misappropriating bank funds, sentencing them to 3 years in federal prison. Matt stays free while Florence buys Mainland Bank. 3 years after their Senate testimony, Congress passes the Fair Housing Act, making it illegal to refuse property sales or rentals based on race, religion, or gender. 3 years later, Bernard is released from prison and greeted by Joe and his wife. The men are happy they got off easy, but Bernard's wife is confused by their joy since they're bankrupt. Bernard then reveals that before the first hearing, Matt called him, admitting the senator pressured him and that he had to testify against Bernard. Bernard then asked Matt for a favor, to sell some of their assets and buy him and Joe 2 mansions in the Bahamas. Matt succeeded, and the friends moved into their luxurious homes there. If you enjoyed this recap, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like to show your support. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.